Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Edward Grafe. I'm a graduate student for the University of Arkansas Fayetteville, and today I'm going to give you an introduction to silicon solar cells. Now, first off, what I'm going to discuss is the sun. The sun is really the most important thing here because without the sun, solar cells wouldn't really matter. So, what you have from the sun is a spectrum. Now, this is a black body curve. This is just like your ideal heat source. This is your ideal body that's going to emit radiation. The sun is something like this. All right? It's coming from the sun to the earth, and this is the spectrum that it looks like. Now, after it's hit our atmosphere, after it's gone through absorption and re-emission over and over again as it goes down, it looks something like that. All right? And this is the one that we want to look at. All right, this is the important spectrum that we're going to be using to design our solar cells. And this is called AM 1.5. All right, the total power from AM 1.5 is roughly 1 kilowatt per meter squared per second. All right, that's a lot of power, and if we could harness that would go a long way into killing our dependence on fossil fuels. So, how do we harness this energy? And this is through the use of solar cells. Well, solar cells work under a a relatively simplistic method called the photovoltaic effect. All right. So photo, meaning light, and voltaic. And voltaic stands for voltage. So the photovoltaic effect means that when light hits a silicon solar cell, it produces a voltage which allows us to which draws a current which allows us to power the devices that you sometimes will see being powered by solar cells. A perfect example is the solar cell operating calculators that you can buy for $2 or $3 from the store or Best Buy or something like that. That's a really good example. Um, and what I'm going to discuss with you today are silicon solar cells in particular, because in the solar cell industry, they actually take up 85% of the market. Now, the other 15% is highly expensive solar cells that are made through a bunch of different processes, can be slightly toxic, are hard to mass produce. There's a lot of issues with them. But I'm going to talk about silicon, represented by Si, because of a couple of things. A, it's very abundant. I mean, just think of it. It's sand, all right? Sand is technically silicon oxide, but we can pull the silicon from sand relatively easy and harness it for our needs. Two, you use it all the time, so there's already a manufacturing system set up. I mean, the reason why it takes up 85% of the market is because you use silicon-based devices every day. I mean, it's in your cell phone, it's in your coffee cups, in your glass dishes, stuff like that. I mean, it's in your computer. I mean, that's all silicon. That's what is all used here. And so, being able to adapt the silicon industry that normally designs chips into designing solar cells, that's just a plus, and that's why it's probably one of the most affordable ways to power your home, next to coal technology or hydropower or wind power, one of the other forms of power that you can harness. So, there are three forms silicon solar cells can take. The first one is called monocrystal. All right, mono stands for single crystal. So I mean, you're talking about a single crystal, 12 to 16 feet tall, about anywhere from a half a foot to a foot wide, weighing several hundred pounds. And what they'll do is they'll cut this crystal up into very thin sheets, and they'll turn those sheets into solar cells. These are your most expensive silicon solar cells. simply because they require the most amount of time in manufacture to make sure that crystal is very nice and uniform. That's where it gets a lot of its capabilities. The maximum um, efficiencies, which the way they measure efficiency is you know the amount of energy that is coming from the sun, which is 1 kilowatt per meter squared per second, and you measure the power output from the silicon solar cell when exposed to this amount of this specific spectrum of light. And right now, the efficiencies that we can get are around 22%. Some have said it's a little bit higher, but there's no commercially available solar cell higher than 22% right now. The next one is called polycrystalline. All right. Well, you had monocrystalline standing for one. Poly must mean more than one, and you'd be right. And so it's it's less expensive than monocrystalline. It's also probably one of the ones that is sought after the most in terms of solar cell technology and research, because they're trying to push this one up to where it's getting the same efficiency as monocrystalline. I mean, right now for polycrystalline, the top efficiency is sitting somewhere between 18 and 19% efficient. All right, that's pretty high. They're close. They're in a battle with each other, and there are some interesting technologies that are being applied to these now that could push them even higher. The last one that I'm going to talk about, which is the cheapest, it's the one that you all know. It's in all those calculators, and it's called amorphous. All right, that means it doesn't have a crystalline structure. It is randomly placed at silicon atoms in a big, huge bulk. I mean, very cheap to produce. I mean, this would be it's pennies on the dollar. Problem is though, you sacrifice you get a lot of it cheap, but you don't get the efficiency. You only get efficiencies up to maybe 6%. All right. In most houses that you're going to see nowadays, most people are going to go with polycrystalline. I mean, you can look on average. I mean, you'll spend $10,000 to $15,000, sometimes more, in for installing a polycrystalline solar cell unit. But what you can do is you can produce enough power with these to not only power your home, but your next door neighbor's home. And you can sell, in certain states that is, you can sell that energy back, and the electric companies will actually send you checks saying, thank you for this energy, here, we'll pay it off, we'll pay you back for it. And you can almost turn it into kind of a business. I mean, you're not really trying to do that, you're just trying to power your home, but yeah, I mean, it's a very lucrative deal. And so I've basically given you an introduction to solar cells, just how they work, what they need to work, and the different forms that silicon solar cells can take. Thank you very much.